Yeah, all right. So I'm Tejas Patel. I'm a program manager on the Project Rome team.
I'm Juan Oviedo. I'm a program manager in the Project Rome team as well.
And so today we're going to talk about, and the title is really long here, but improve productivity for cross-platform and cross-device apps using Microsoft Graph and Project Rome. So the first thing that we wanted to really kind of talk about was the agenda of what we have today. So there's kind of four big concepts that we're going to be talking about. So one is, what is Rome? So you've probably heard Rome is a code word from Microsoft for a bunch of different stuff. So we'll kind of break down what we're talking about of what Project Rome is. Second big concept is, what is a device relay? So we're going to talk about how devices can play with each other and talk to each other. The next part is really about the activity feed. So being able to understand what your activities are on a daily basis and how that will kind of help you get more productive when you're using multiple devices. And then quickly on how to get started with Project Rome. So the first main thing is really kind of 85% of the workers in the US and 77% of the rest of the world really compete their kind of business tasks using multiple devices. And really what that means is in the workplace, we oftentimes have a lot of our users that bring in phones that are personal phones. They work with their PCs, they might work with their Macs, but effectively, depending on what they're doing, they want to get to a better suited device. The second part is 80% of workers receive one or more corporate devices. So, and typically, depending on the region of the world, that might be even a little bit higher, but it might be multiple devices as well. So effectively, some people are bringing their own devices for smartphones, some are company issued, but all of these silos you just keep adding devices and devices, and you lose a lot of context and a lot of productivity when transitioning between devices. And finally, the last part is finding the right device for the right task. So oftentimes we're looking at our emails on our phone, and it's great to read them. You can do really short replies, but a lot of times you want to sit down on your PC if you're kind of putting in more graphics, additional text, you really want to kind of think about it, and you want to be able to transition seamlessly between these devices to really get kind of your mind wrapped around the problem and not have to be constrained by a small screen. So really, we're juggling a lot of different tasks, a lot of different apps, a lot of different devices, and really that's what Project Rome is here to solve. So what we're going to be talking about today are kind of two things. So we're going to be talking about first what we have available now, and then Juan's going to be talking about some of the features that we're going to be adding in the future. So really the first part about Project Rome is we found problems with, hey, we have so many devices out there that are in our hands, our tablets, our PCs, our desktops, maybe even gaming devices, in the future some IoT devices, but really we as users have to gravitate to each different device experience separately. So effectively, we spend a lot of time saying, hey, I have this device here, I have this device here, but there's nothing magic that can connect these devices to really provide a more personalized experience for a user. So that's what we talk about discovery. It's like we have all these devices, but not all of them are really connected in a meaningful way to each other. The second is activation. So it's great. I'm on my, let's just say I'm an email on my device. Well, oftentimes, now I have to walk over to my laptop, log on, find that email, or actually start the app, find the particular email I was working on, and kind of in that time, a lot of times, you might be looking at something else that has more context in, but when you switch, it's, all right, well, I'm kind of starting all over again. So really, one of the other issues is this kind of seamless transition between devices. That's another kind of key pillar of Rome. And then finally, even once an application on the other device is up, there may have been data that you needed from your previous device. There might be some state information about that application on your previous device that you want to actually kind of come over to your new device or the device that you transferred to. So kind of when we talk about device relay, it's about being able to take these things and say, hey, I want to continue now on a different device, but please provide all the context and everything that I was doing along on my previous device. And then what Juan's going to be talking about are user activities. So user activities kind of have three key elements to them. So one is, often when we're switching from device to device, hey, I was working on this email, there might have been this web browser open that had this particular site, there might have been PowerPoint, but often then when we go to a different device, we just say, oh yeah, here's the one app. But really, to be able to visualize everything that was happening around you on that second device, because you want to continue later, we want to make sure there's a good platform way of being able to bring the visuals together that you were doing on a previous device. The second is personalized. So using A lot of the business intelligence via Cortana, a couple of our other services, we want to provide what's most relevant to a user. So oftentimes, over a period of time, we see, hey, that you're continuing later or picking up later on a different device. Well, we want to learn more like what's the most frequent things that you do that we don't nag you with things that aren't really relevant for what you're doing. So that's kind of the second thing. And then the third is once you take the visuals and the personalization, what we want to be able to do is re-engage a user to their existing context that they were on a different device or a different point in time previously. And so there hasn't really been kind of good ways to do it. So really, when we take a look at Project Rome, it's really to kind of bring both of these together. And really, Rome is an umbrella. And really, it's a set of programming interfaces. It's a set of infrastructure services. And we're going to make it available cross-platform because we know a lot of, from our own mobile experiences, iOS and Android are prevalent out there. We want it to work well on PCs. So basically, you as a user should be able to transcend your apps and devices without really having to think about it. And as we were talking about it before, when we're talking about the device scenarios, really that falls under what we call our bucket of remote control and sessions. So these are effectively the names of the programming interfaces that are out there. So the first is being able to stitch all of your devices together, which falls under the device discovery bucket. The second is to be able to launch an application onto a different device to basically resume that app. And the third is being able to communicate amongst different applications or even the same application to be able to get stateful data back so you can resume. And that's kind of the first part. Now the second part is activities. So this is really all around activity feed. So the first part is user activities. So it's context-based, point-in-time references to what a user was doing. It's a unit of engagement. It's kind of the way to think about it. And the second part of that is once you have a bunch of user activities, that becomes effectively an activity feed. So it's a collection of user activities for a given user. And then finally, to represent these cleanly for your users within your apps, there's a notion that's called adaptive cards. And it's basically the visuals that really tie all of this together. And for both sides of their umbrella, these are both available or going to be available for the later stuff on iOS, Android, Windows. So really what we're going after is not just a Windows-centric view, it's really a user-centric view that can work across any devices. So the first thing I'm going to talk about here is device relay. That's kind of the left-hand bucket. So what I'll do is a quick demo. And this kind of will go over kind of the key concepts of Rome. And one of the things I'm in right now is so we've integrated with MS Graph. And MS Graph is a great way to get started with Rome if you're into it. And so the first thing that we were talking about earlier was being able to associate, basically get a list of a user's devices. So in this particular case, what I've already gone ahead and done is canned all of my information in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a query. And basically what it's going to return is a list of my devices associated with my identity. And identity-wise right now, we do support Microsoft account across the board. And on some of the other platforms, we're going to start adding Azure AD support. So on Windows, we already have Azure AD support. But for the other platforms, that's going to be coming soon. And so what this query did at the end of the day was return my list of devices back to me. So it's basically going to give me kind of a description of my devices, what type of device they are, so you as a developer, when you're actually doing these queries, have a little bit more context on what's the best device for a given task, right? So when you're building your UI in your app, you can say, hey, this is another tablet, or this is a smartphone. But if you're really looking for a big screen, we'll start providing you more information about the devices that are associated with you so you can find the most appropriate device for a user. And then kind of the second motion from there is being able to launch something. So in this particular case, I've gone ahead and seeded a command in here, which is called launch URI, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But effectively, what launch URI does is basically brings an app to the foreground. So in this particular case, what I've done is gone ahead and launched our product info page. But it provides kind of a quick way to bring an application to the foreground on Windows, so then you can get a user into a given task or an application. And then finally, the last part that we talked about a little bit earlier was apps being able to talk to each other. So this is just a brief sample, but this is what's known as app services, and we'll talk about that. And effectively, what it enables you to do is to be able to communicate to a given device. So now, using one of the apps that we've integrated on here, I've just sent a notification to say, hey, I want to start messaging with this application that's installed on this device, and just gave a quick hello world. So that's basically kind of the three motions. So device discovery, so after a user associates their devices. Second is being able to launch applications to the foreground. And finally, the last part is being able to communicate between applications to send state data or other messaging data and value sets across the wire. So now as we kind of dig into these a little bit more, one of the first things I kind of wanted to point out is now the capabilities that you just saw were a part of Microsoft Graph. So this is really Windows kind of moving into the Microsoft Graph as well. So if you're already doing other things with groups or reports or events or calendar or email especially, and you have a web experience, Rome supports web experiences through MS Graph. That's where our APIs are surfaced through. If you're using clients, we do provide clients or SDKs, sorry, for iOS and Android, and of course on Windows. But depending on the experience that you're trying to enable, we do have the dev or the right platform for the right developer tools out there. Now, another part of the Rome functionality, and you might have heard of it and it came out a little bit earlier, was apps for websites. So one of the things that we heard a lot from our developers, including enterprise developers and commercial developers, was, hey, I want greater app engagement. So a feature that we built inside of Windows was basically to be able to launch an app inside of a website. And so effectively, if you have your URL defined, what you can do is post that to your site, and anytime someone tries to go to it, it'll actually launch the app. And the feedback that we got was, hey, we want people to be pushed to the app because we can provide richer experiences and we can kind of center focus for a user. So a lot of times when we're browsers, what we heard from educational customers is, hey, my students are kind of going all over the place. We really want them to go there, but way a lot of these students remember where to go is, well, there's a little URL shortcut and go over there, but really kind of getting them back into the app again. So that's apps for websites. The next is kind of what we've already kind of seen in the demo before, which is Launch URI. And what Launch URI effectively does is say, hey, start me up, but start me up over there on a different device. And really what this is really kind of the first motion to bring up an application into the foreground on Windows. So when you're talking, when I did the first launch, basically it brought the application to the foreground, which is kind of the important part. But now there's another part to Launch URI, which is that it supports custom schemes. And what custom schemes really mean is, for instance, if I'm in a specific point in my application, I can create a custom scheme that'll automatically open the application and even navigate to a particular point in your application. So if you're in one experience on your mobile device, let's just say, and on a specific tab, you can then open the application on the target device using the same context and the same location. That's one common example that is kind of used for. But really, kind of the key thing with Launch URI is bringing that experience to the foreground. Is kind of the intent of it. Now, when we kind of move down a little bit more, the next thing you want to do is, okay, so I brought up this application. Now I need to talk about getting contextual data. So as we talked about a little bit before, it's enabling app-to-app communication. So kind of on Windows right now, what we actually enable is one app can talk to a different app on the same device. And then later on, what you can also do is have an app on one device talk to an app on a different device. Now, they can be the same app, or there can be different apps. And basically, what that enables you to do as a developer is to kind of enable richer experiences across your apps as a publisher, or if you're actually trying to do some extensibility work with another application that you may use, it kind of enhances the richness of experience inside of that application. Now, the thing about app services is that it can work in the background or foreground, right? So if if the app is in the foreground, it can continue messaging it. And where that's really useful for is you can do things like companion experiences. So for instance, if you have a mobile device in one hand and you're looking at your laptop in another, let's just assume that you're doing a PowerPoint, for all intents and purposes. Well, what you can actually do now is message that target device and give it state data to say, hey, I actually want you to go to slide 6. I want you to go to slide 7. So you can build a nice remote control companion experience for your application. The other part is, let's just say on the target device, the user moves the app into the background, but you happen to still be on your mobile device. In that case, if there's still state data that might be changing on the target device, you can still query that other device and get information back from it onto your source device. So it's really effectively a two-way channel to be able to get data to and from that other application, and you can do interesting stuff like, as I was mentioning, companion applications. You can remote control a device. So there's kind of a whole expansive scenarios that you can enable or features that you can enable within your applications. And then kind of moving on from there, one new feature that we're going to introduce soon in about a week or so is called Sessions. So when we take a look at the first two scenarios where we're talking about launching a website, launching a URI, launching an app service, that's between one user's set of devices. What sessions are is basically a way to discover other devices around you in proximity, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then using an app, you can collaborate with other users. And really what that means is using a data pipe, right? So what will happen in sessions is someone will open their application and say, hey, I want to be able to start a session with other users. Other users will then be able to discover that session, join the session, and once the session is established, what they'll be able to do is send data across that channel to be able to convey two things. So one is effectively state data, and the other is kind of what we say other data, but really what it means is lossy data. And where sessions is very useful that we've seen so far is around AR and VR scenarios. So for instance, if I'm in a room, I have a few folks in there, I have my device on, what it can then do is if we have a virtual room, I can now kind of get coordinates of, hey, here's my room setup, so that's state data because that's kind of fixed points. I can then use kind of the lossier channels, right, for sending other data. So if my head moves or my position moves within the room, I don't need to have full fidelity of that data, but it gets you close enough to understand, hey, we're in proximity in this room, are these other devices, and what are they doing? So it's really useful kind of for AR, VR, but even for standard applications, if you just want to enable kind of basic, and not really for messaging per se, but for just chatty data that goes across between your applications, within an application just to kind of communicate. It's a really useful set of APIs for that. Kind of following on from there are kind of organizational considerations. So initially with Project Rome, we really kind of went, hey, what does it mean for a commercial developer? But really what we're trying to do now with Project Rome is really start moving into the enterprise space. So we want to make sure that your line of business applications can take advantage of these capabilities, but also to make sure that as an organization, you also have the right controls around this functionality. So there are policies already available for Project Rome features to basically enable and disable the functionality. So if you don't want your users to use that, you can actually set group policy or MDM policy on your Windows devices to be able to control the usage of that. Now, as I was mentioning before, for identity support, right now we do support Microsoft Account and Azure AD on Windows. And for the other platforms, including Android, iOS, and via MS Craft, we'll be adding Azure AD support very soon. Now, one of the other things I was also mentioning was connectivity. So from a connectivity perspective, for all of the scenarios that you saw earlier that were around launch URI and for app services, those work both proximally and through the cloud. And what I mean by proximally is we enable Bluetooth discovery. So if the device is really close to you, you're just able to discover it via Bluetooth. We also support local LAN. So if your device is on the same subnet as your other device, we're able to discover that via local discovery. But we also do is we work over the cloud. So if your devices aren't on the same network and you want to be able to instantiate an app service or launch an app onto a different device, we also work through the cloud. So those are kind of the key organizational considerations. Now, as I said, we're starting on enterprise, so at the Q&A or at the end of the session, it would be kind of great to get your feedback on kind of the controls or additional functionality that you would need to enable these Rome scenarios within your organizations, both for educational and also for enterprise or business scenarios. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Juan so he can talk a little bit about the activity feed. Looks like we're having some issues with our mics, so let me do this. Here, let me give you some, excuse me, sorry about that.
Hello. Okay, good. Hello, everyone. So as Tej just mentioned, Project Rome, it's comprised of the remote systems and sessions aspect of it on the left, and then the activities portion on the right. The goal behind activities is to enable you as the app developer to send activity signals for things that are relevant for re-engagement from that user at a later point in time. Looking at it from a high-level perspective, the three key components for activities are the UserActivity APIs, which are available on Windows and also available over our MS Graph. I'll go into more details as part of the presentation. We also have the activity feed, which is the collection of activities for a specific user based on their identity. And we also have the adaptive cards, which are a visual representation of those activities and where you as the developer have the opportunity to communicate the essence of what the user was doing and your brand to ensure that they're drawn back into the experience. So, I'll show you a demo of the experiences that are powered by the activities platform. Specifically, on the fall creators update, we are releasing an experience called Cortana notifications. Essentially what it does is it can see, based on the user's MSA, it sees activities that the user was performing on one device. So as an app developer, you communicate those activities using our APIs. In this example, when I go to the Action Center on this device, you can see that I was browsing websites on another device earlier today, and Edge wrote the activities to the activity graph for me. Those expire like every 30 minutes or so. And then on this other device, I can easily just click on that activity from the Action Center, and I can easily re-engage with it on the other device. So as you can see, the value here is that as a user, I don't have to go and remember what I was working on or go and search for it again. It's something that Cortana notifies me about, and I'm able to easily re-engage with it with a single click. That's an experience that we're powering in the Fall Creators Update and will be available for you to try. In this initial release, it's limited to MSA, but we're working on adding AD support in the future. The other experience that is powered by activities, which is coming in the future, is Timeline. This experience was announced at Build earlier this year, and essentially it's an extension of the task view. The task view today shows you things that you're actively working on, so you can see the apps that I'm running. And basically the extension is that now I can also look at things that I did in the past. So as you can see, for each day, I see a list of the activities that I was engaged with. Timeline by default shows me the activities that I spent the most time on so that I can find those easily. But then I can also expand that view and see all of the activities that I performed in that day. So for example, if earlier this week I was looking for a place to find food here in Orlando, so I looked that up in Maps. I can tap on that, and let me try it again. Basically, I can tap on it and it launches the, one second. This is an experience in development, just so you guys know. So we're working on it, but yeah. And it basically launches maps to that location that I was looking for earlier. So as you can see, the value is that for me as a user, I'm able to go back in time, find those things that are relevant for me, and re-engage with them. Additionally, it provides search capabilities. So you can basically, for example, if I wanted to find things related to Project Rome that I have done in the past, I can simply type Rome, and it shows me activities that are related to the term Rome. And then when I tap on one of those cards, it takes me back to that activity with a single click. So as you can see, it's very easy for me as a user to re-engage with these activities. And from an enterprise perspective, this is something that you as developers can take advantage of to enable your employees in your organizations or your customers to be as productive as possible by easily re-engaging with those activities. Continuing on, essentially, let me show you. So to summarize, the activities platform enables re-engagement of users across different experiences. As I showed you, Cortana on PC, the Cortana notifications experience is coming out with the Fall Creators Update. You can see those activities there. You can re-engage them easily. Additionally, Cortana on phone, on Android and on iOS can also notify the user about those activities so they can re-engage even on other platforms. And Timeline is an experience that will be released in the future that also is powered by the Activities platform. The value here is that you can write these activities using the Activities APIs that are available on Windows, but additionally, using the MS Graph APIs, you can write activities even if the user is on non-Windows devices. So it's very powerful, it's very flexible, and it really enables you to increase the productivity from all these users. In terms of organizational considerations, it's something that is very important for us, and we are making sure that as part of these experiences, you and your organizations have the power and the tools needed to control these experiences and to control the data. So specifically, we have MDM and group policies that can be used to turn off activities generation on specific devices and also turn off uploading of activities to the cloud. Additionally, we are also making sure that users have the ability to control what data is uploaded, what information is shared as part of these experiences. So in the Fall Creators update, users can control this via Cortana settings. They can disable or control the functionality of re-engaging across devices. And additionally, they have an accounts privacy portal that they can go to where they can deauthorize applications from writing activities on their behalf. So users have control there. And in the future, we're also working on a system-wide settings page that will enable users to disable activity generation on a particular device, as well as deleting activities for a given application, deleting all activities, as well as filtering activities for a given account from the Timeline experience.
Yep, and one other thing to add to that too is, as we're kind of looking at compliance around the world, so it's something we spent a lot of time on as we've been going through this feature. And one of the other things that I forgot to include in there was also we're going to be GDPR compliant as well. So any of the data that's generated by activities, two things, as Juan was mentioning. One is an org, you'll have control over it. It'll be GDPR compliant, and through the privacy portal itself, users will be in complete control of all their activities.
Additionally, in terms of identity support, as I mentioned in the Fall Creators update, we're releasing the Cortana notifications experience, which is supported with MSA. It's tied to the user's identity there. But in the future, we will also be releasing AAD support, as well as additional re-engagement surfaces. So to go into more details of how these activities work and how the activity feed is generated, basically, the UserActivities API, the UserActivity object has three key components. The first one is a deep link URI, which is basically what enables your app to be activated and to take the user into the content that is relevant for them. This deep link URI can be a custom scheme that your app declares in its manifest, or if your app makes use of App URI handlers, the feature that they just covered, you can simply use a web address and the system will take care of activating your app and taking the user to the content within the app. The content metadata portion is basically an ability that you have to annotate that activity with context and additional information. For example, for the activities related to Orlando, let's say, like coming to the conference, you could annotate those activities with a location like Orlando, or an activity or an action like planning a trip here. And essentially, that information can be used by Windows to group those activities logically, and also by Cortana to make inferences and to recommend other activities that are related and relevant based on what you were doing. This content metadata, we're using definitions from schema.org. So we're using that standard, and you can look at more information there, and our documentation as well to see what type of annotations you can include. The adaptive card portion is basically the visual representation of the activity. It's where you have the opportunity to control the description and a background image and the look and feel of the card to bring the user back into the experience. And essentially, those three things are combined into a user activity, which accrues engagement records, and those are basically added to the user's activity feed. And then from there, our service takes care of finding out that information to all of the user's devices so that they're able to re-engage as they go from device to device. And the goal here is to increase productivity by reducing the friction and the time that it takes for the user to re-engage with something that is relevant for him or her. In terms of a good user activity, some things to keep in mind is that it really depends on the experience that you want to provide and what users do with your app. Some general guidance is that you want to create activities for things that the user is likely to want to resume. So for example, with document-based applications like Excel, users are working on documents, so you can create an activity for that specific document. And by doing that, the user will be able to then get back to that document and continue working on it and editing as they go from device to device. Also, it's a good process to not make them too granular, the activities, and to think of them in terms of sessions. So for media playback applications, like for example, imagine like a training app where your users go to watch videos and learn about different topics. You could create an activity that takes them back to the specific module within that course so that they can easily re-engage and continue. But then other types of applications, like for example, music playback applications where you have a playlist that is played in a random order. In that case, the activity is probably better suited by having just the playlist. So it really depends on the context and what you want the user to be able to achieve. And lastly, ensuring that you have deep links to your app that take the user to the content that is relevant for them. So in line of business applications where you have specific workflows, like for example, an expense reporting app, you could have an activity for that specific expense report and then take the user to it so that he or she can continue working on that report. And going back to user activities, as I mentioned, this is the visual representation of the activity. So it's your opportunity to control the look and feel of the card to ensure that the user understands the essence of what they were doing and they're able to get back to it. You can learn more about adaptive cards at adaptivecards.io. And also tomorrow at 9 a.m., Matt and Thomas from our team, they're going to give a presentation where they'll provide more details on adaptive cards, and I highly recommend that you go there to learn more. So to summarize activities, to get started, basically you have the Windows APIs for UWPs. You can learn more about those at aka.ms user activities. And then we also have the MS Graph APIs, which basically enable you to write activities not only just from Windows, but also on other platforms. And the goal here is that you can re-engage the user as they go from device to device, and when they go over to like iOS or Android, but also when they go back to Windows. And now Tejas is going to close with some final comments.
All right, so kind of as we were talking earlier, so one was really effectively all the devices and how can I connect all of my devices to me and have re-engaging experiences. So when we take a look at it, it's really all of my devices equals kind of in our heads, what's my user's device graph, right? So the more devices that you have, the more difficult it becomes going from device to device. So it's really making sure that as a user, I have a graph of all my devices and my applications that I can re-engage with on those target devices are all available. And then kind of the second half is what Juan was talking about, which is activities, which is how do I re-engage at a later point within an application or within an experience, or how do I get all the context I was working on one device onto another, and it can follow me around device to device. So really, if we think about devices, it's, hey, I want to continue something now, is kind of what the API set is designed for. And when we think about activities, it's accruing all to something of, hey, I want to continue this later, but please bring all my context and everything else I was doing at the same time with me to that new experience. And using kind of the metadata that we provide both about datas and activities, as an application, you can actually make really, really good decisions for your users by providing them the right device for the right task and also the right context for the right apps that are open on a particular device or something that you're trying to continue later on. And really, that's what Roam is. It's really being able to kind of interconnect all these different devices, user context via activities, into kind of a graph of the user's activities and devices so they can just be more productive. Now, initially, it's kind of like one of those things today where if I start on something, I kind of go over there, but you forget about all the little things kind of along the way that you have to do to re-engage as a user. And sometimes it's kind of, hey, I was thinking about that while I was working on that, but I don't, unless I explicitly wrote it down, I'm not going to remember it. So what this is really also designed to do is to kind of bring back those little bits of context so you're able to more quickly resume and remain productive across your devices without having to think about each different interaction separately. So that's really kind of what the core of Project Roam is. Now with that, we talked a little bit about devices, so just kind of as a quick recap, it's basically re-engage a user immediately on a different device. And for the first two sets of APIs, which is Launch URI and App Services, we currently support that across a user's device. So for my own devices, I can enable that functionality. And finally, with sessions, I can actually enable others via my application. So I can actually collaborate with other devices, other apps, and other users. Now, for those APIs, the launch URI and app services are available on Windows, Android, and iOS. Right now, for Android and iOS, I can launch to Windows. In the future, we're going to add support going from Windows back over to Android and iOS. For MS Graph, same thing applies. And then for sessions, a little bit later on, we'll add support for that in Android and iOS as well. The next part is activities. So really, it's all about re-engagement. I was working on something. Here are all the apps that were open. Here's the context in which I was working in. And so now I can just basically rehydrate that experience that was on a different device on my device that I'm currently working on. And really, when we think about user activities, it's just the unit of engagement. And it really consists of kind of those three key elements, which is the deep link URIs, the visual metadata, or excuse me, the visual elements, and then the content metadata, like what's important about the specific thing I was working on. And right now, we do offer the UWP API for Windows. And then for other non-Windows devices, right now, we offer, you can use MS Graph. So if you're on iOS or Android, or even a web experience, you can actually start publishing activities through MS Graph. Go. All right. And so right now, we do have SDKs for all devices. I'll get to the next slide. All right. All right. So kind of from an API recap, so the slides are all going to be published out. As we kind of mentioned earlier, so we started kind of our journey with Rome in about, I would say, what, RS1. So kind of the anniversary update is kind of our first release of Rome features. Creators Update, which we released about 6 months ago, kind of has additional ones. And the fall Creators Update is going to contain more, but then there are kind of the annotations. So right now, if we look at Android, iOS, and MS Graph, everything's, if I want to target something to Windows, that's working, but we'll start offering support going the other direction in the future as well. So those are kind of the quick links. So if you want to kind of learn more about Project Rome, just go to aka.ms/Project Rome, and that'll have a link to the links to all of our SDKs, all the developer documentation, and everything that you need to get started. In addition, we do have some quick reference guides up here. Just want to make sure I hand those out to you guys. But it's really easy. And as I was mentioning earlier, if you just want kind of the quick and dirty way just to kind of get your head wrapped around the concepts, I highly recommend starting off using the MS Graph APIs. They're just really quick and easy to get started with. And then there's also some sample apps that we have out there that'll work along with MS Graph. So it's a quick way to bootstrap and get really, kind of understand more about Rome. All right, so do a question and answer, Q&A, questions? Someone has to have a question. Ah, yes. So the question is, if I have an enterprise website.
Yeah, like it's an integrated system, but not a Windows product, and some of the components are mobile friendly, others are not. So if you're working in a single sign-on kind of environment, that's all Windows, you can still access it, but would that still work in this setting?
Okay, so let me make sure I got the question right. So if I'm in an enterprise mobile application provided by a web experience, will it have the ability to support things such as single sign-on?
Yes, where parts of the, maybe some of the actual stuff that you're sharing may not be mobile friendly.
Okay, and then the second part is where it may not be mobile friendly. And so if you're building web experiences using Project Rome, effectively, if you have the sign-on, so one of the things we're also looking at is how do we, on mobile experiences, kind of make sure that if you signed on to the device that you're on, we make it a lot easier to support that single sign-on across multiple applications. So that's something we're kind of heavily investing in a little bit more in the future, but it is something that comes top of mind to us because we don't want to provide an experience which says, hey, I sign into the app, now yet I have to sign in again once I go to another app, or if I'm coming back into this experience, I'm getting a second sign-on. So that's something we're actively investigating right now, but we will see improvements coming in the future. Yes.
You spoke a lot about your investments in the enterprise, but what about the consumer space?
So consumer space is actually where we started.
Yeah.
So in the consumer space, we continue to make progress over there. So the big things for enterprise that we're investing in are around policies and identity support. For the consumer side, what we're really, really focused on right now is to make sure that the performance and the reliability of these scenarios is close to 100% as we can get, to make sure that if you have an app engaged and you've taken the time to enlighten your application with Roam, that you're able to start really quickly and then integrate across the platforms that you want to support, but also making sure that as a developer on those particular consumer scenarios that you're trying to enable, that it works 100% of the time, really reliably, and making sure it's super quick so you don't lose user engagement throughout your app.
So what you're saying is you're taking telemetry data right now with what you provided, and when you see stable, you continue to invest.
So once we get to the point of stabilization, there's still other features that are on a roadmap that we want to continue to invest in. So activities is kind of one thing that we see, hey, we want to be able to provide that re-engagement experience for developers. So right now, kind of upcoming is, initially we're going to say, hey, you're allowed to publish all of your activities. And at some point, we want to make sure that you as a publisher of that software can get all of your activities back, so then you can start providing value to your own users to give them the right recommendations, the right tasks that they want to do within the app. On the devices side, one of the things that I mentioned earlier was around sessions. So right now, we're just kind of launching it. I'm trying to understand the feedback around it, but that works really in proximity. So it works if your devices are close by. One of the things that we want to be able to say is, hey, if people are really interested in this from a consumer side, once we start doing more AR, VR, or more collaborative applications, is there a lot of value for us to add stuff to work through the cloud as well? So for instance, if I'm in a remote office, or I have a friend of mine that's in their house and I'm at my house, how much is it accruing value to the scenarios that you want to enable? So that's something we're kind of gauging as well, telemetry-wise, to say, all right, this guy can connect, this guy can connect. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, if there's kind of feedback that you have right now, please provide it to us, and then we'll bring that in as well.
Yeah, and to add to what Tejas just said, on our website, you can also find contact information for us. Those emails go directly to our team, and we're really interested in hearing your feedback, your thoughts, and something that it's very important for us.
Do you guys have user voice?
Yes. And that's through, on Windows we do.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Questions? All right, I think everyone's getting antsy to go.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.